When we are using Cramer's Rule in order to solve a system, Cramer's Rule says that if the system has a solution, then you can find the value of x by taking the determinant with respect to x divided by the regular determinant, and you can find the value of y by taking the determinant with respect to y divided by the regular determinant. So we will first start out with just finding our regular determinant. So in our regular determinant matrix, your x coefficients will go in the first column and your y coefficients will go in the second. So when I look at my system, I notice that 12 is the coefficient of x in the top equation and 9 is on bottom. So in this first column, I will put my coefficients of 12 and 9. When I look at my y variable, negative 8 is the coefficient in the top equation, positive 9 is in the bottom, so I will put those numbers in the second column, negative 8 and positive 9. Now, remember when we calculate a determinant, we start with top left to bottom right, so 12 times 9 gives me 108, and then we always subtract the other cross product. 9 times negative 8 is negative 72. When you're subtracting a negative, that's the same as adding a positive. So 108 plus 72 leaves me with 180. Now we'll look at the determinant with respect to x. What happens in this matrix is your constants will replace your x coefficients and your y coefficients will remain the same. So when I look at my given system of equations, I will notice that I have constants of negative 44 and negative 63. So those values come in the first column to replace the x coefficients that I had in the original matrix. My y coefficients are still negative 8 and positive 9. So those will stay the same. So now I'm ready to find my determinant. I first start with the negative 44 and I multiply it by 9 and I get a negative 396. And then I'm going to subtract my other cross product, which is a negative 8 times a negative 63. That will give me a positive 504. So since we're subtracting, that's the same as adding the opposite. So if I add the negative 396 plus the negative 504, I'm left with a negative 900. And at this point, we can find the value of x. So I know that my value of x is my determinant with respect to x divided by my determinant. So if I take a negative 900 and I divide it by a positive 180, then I find that my x value is negative 5. Now you could at this point as well plug the x back into one of the original equations to find the y if you wanted, or you can continue with Cramer's rule and find a determinant with respect to y. And what happens in this matrix is you keep your x coefficients in your first column, but your constants are going to replace your y coefficients, which would be in your second column. So back to my original system, my x coefficients were positive 12 and positive 9. And then if I use my constants to replace my y coefficients, the constants are a negative 44 and a negative 63. So now I'm ready to calculate the determinant of that matrix. So if I take a positive 12 and I multiply it by a negative 63, I get a negative 756. Minus, if I take a negative 44 and I multiply it by a positive 9, I get a negative 396. Now when we're subtracting a negative, that's the same as adding a positive. So a negative 756 plus a positive 396 will leave me with a negative 360. So now using Cramer's rule, my y value is the determinant with respect to y divided by the determinant. So in this case, that's a negative 360 divided by a positive 180. So my y value ends up being negative 2. Now notice they ask you to write the answer in the format of an ordered pair. So x would come first, my y value would come second. So that is the solution to that system with Cramer's rule.